Welcome back to the Vince Coglianese Show. All across the country on American college campuses, there is a bizarre and troubling phenomenon taking place, which are that you have students who are marching and agitating for the Hamas position. In fact, celebrating the attack on Israel that took place on October 7th, including honoring the terrorists as, quote, martyrs. That's exactly what happened right here in our area at George Washington University last week, as you had a number of students projecting images onto the side of the school library at George Washington University saying, quote, glory to our martyrs. What do the students on campus think about this, the ones who aren't on board with the pro-Hamas talking points? And in particular, what do the Jewish students think? Let's bring in Sabrina Soffer now. She's a Jewish undergrad at George Washington University and joins us on the phone. Hello, Sabrina. Good to have you with us. Thank you.
I thank you so much for having me on this today. It's really important to cover these stories, especially what's going on here at GW. Jewish students, I'll preface with this, Jewish students don't feel safe on campus. My mom actually just told me that unequivocally I have to take off my Star of David. She really is afraid for my safety. And this is something I've really never done before, but based on what's going on at GW and across the country, I guess that's going to be the safest choice for me at this point.
So do you wear you wear a Star of David as a necklace? Is that how you display it?
I wear a Star of David. I wear a mezuzah, or my name in Hebrew or something. It's something I've done since I was little. The Star of David I got was for my bat mitzvah from a family member, and I actually just replaced it with a Star of David that folds open, so it looks like butterflies now instead of a star. So I guess that's the reality we live in today.
That's amazing, and it's so sad that that's the situation. Are other Jewish students doing something similar in your, as far as you know?
You know, I have some friends who will keep it on, and I've been defiant and kept it on until this point. But given my publicity and everything else, I think because I'm a public face, my parents who live now in California,
yes,
they're very concerned. And I guess that if that's going to make them be assured, I guess myself be reassured as well in my safety, I guess that's the only way to go about it for now.
Sabrina, obviously this interview you and I are doing, it's not the first interview you've done, as you've just alluded to. You also did an interview with the Fox News channel. And what kind of feedback have you received from that? I'm using feedback almost euphemistically at this point, but what reaction have you detected as a result of doing these interviews?
Yeah, so I've also written articles, and I think I've gotten somewhat more of a response, although indirectly, from that. I also do a lot of work on social media, and I post different videos. But from the interviews on Fox and such, I honestly don't think that the people who are opposed to my message will even listen to Fox News.
Sure. So
I think that's one thing. But in terms of like my Instagram, my DMs, that I'm receiving such hateful messages, I've posted on TikTok multiple times in the past, which I recently deleted TikTok because it was just too much.
Yeah.
Like I've had somebody to tell me to go die in the gas chambers. Like it's pretty crazy out there on social media.
Yes.
Articles, in terms of articles, I wrote something in the student newspaper. I wrote 2 articles, but one of them actually discussed the concept of martyrs in Islam. I had a Palestinian friend of mine who luckily we're still able to talk amid all this, which is honestly miraculous. She and I had a conversation about what a martyr means. And she said, you must be careful because in Islam, anybody who dies, even in a natural disaster, in war, in collateral damage, is considered a martyr. So then I asked her and I said, well, why don't you condemn Hamas so we don't confuse groups like you guys who don't stand for Hamas with the terrorists, right? Because that's bad for them. And, long story short, she said basically that like they weren't willing to do that. So still, the moral idiocy is still there, right? You can,
yes.
And I made that very clear in the article. And the next day, the Student for Justice in Palestine chapter at GW posted something about the word martyr, which still justified Hamas's actions. So, it's that was one comment. But I know that, in the past I've had hostility from this student group at GW, threats and such. And at this point, given that my parents know the history of that and I know the hostility I've received over the years that I've been here,
Yeah.
I guess it is the safest bet. I just don't know what can happen, and I'd rather avoid anything. I need to focus on my studies here too. So
Yes, definitely. But I'm grateful that you're speaking out, though, because this story needs to be told. So you mentioned it's interesting that you said you got off of TikTok. I saw there's a writer by the name of Abigail Schreier who this week said that she expressed this on Twitter. She said that TikTok's propaganda algorithms helped convince an entire generation to support the massacre of Jews, she wrote. Imagine what TikTok will do when we need to stand up to China. Obviously, she's bringing this to the next point, which is dealing with China. China controls TikTok. Do you agree with that basic assessment, though, that TikTok has warped the minds of so many young people to the point that they're cheering on Hamas now?
I do believe that social media has played an instrumental role in, the culture that we're seeing today. In BDS, which it's the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement against Israel, they've created this propaganda machine apparatus that infiltrates social media, the media, university campuses. And because social media is so popular amongst youth, and it makes it seem moral, people will just repost, retweet without even thinking, because these videos can be made so appealing. And then it just spreads by the speed of light, basically. So that's the power of social media. And given the work I do on social media, I'm not one to go fight propaganda with propaganda, because I don't think that's the right thing to do. But it's so crazy how people aren't taught to critically think. And this takes me to the point that I wanted to address, is that in the universities, there's a whole culture that's pervaded the minds of young people. And it's in this culture of, we have the oppressed and the oppressor, and all of the people deemed oppressors are bad and they should be resisted even violently. And then all the oppressed are the underdogs, and we must sympathize with them no matter what, even if that requires violence. So it's this combined with misinformation and hate speech that breeds the violence that we see today. And this sort of ideology is being perpetuated in the classroom on top of the distortion of facts that's also occurring. Not in every classroom, but many.
There's a video this week I'm just seeing today from Harvard. Harvard students are against Israel. They're protesting against Israel. And in the video, they surround a Jewish student and they refuse to let him leave. They're in a public space. They're standing out in green space on a sidewalk. And it looks like it's just one Jewish student. There may be others there. But the anti-Israel group surrounds him, and they essentially refuse him. They detain him. They refuse to let him even leave. They press up against him with their signs and their chanting. That's got to be, first of all, nauseating. It is for me to see. But what do you make of this phenomenon that you have students who feel so comfortable just straight up assaulting their fellow students on account of their what appears to be Judaism?
Yeah, I'd like to say, and so this is something I've always said, they're victims of hate. These kids who are perpetuating these acts, it's tragic for them, because really they're wasting their time, they're wasting their life basically being steeped in hatred. But at this point, I don't know how much this can be undone, right? And a student, for being Jewish, should never have to endure what they're putting these students through. For example, at Tulane University as well.
Yep.
That's another instance of complete violence, and it's like anarchy has broken out in the streets. It's almost like, and this is something that I've been sharing with my parents, and what gets me so afraid is that we're living in a society that's like Nazi Germany. And we see this around the world. And these things are being justified, not condemned, and they continue to pervade. So that's why attacks like that at Harvard, like that at Tulane, and at Berkeley, and at GW, like what happened on Saturday, where demonstrators of a pro-Palestinian rally came to the ZBT frat house, which is a Jewish frat, and they started waving flagpoles so as to strike the brothers. If security wasn't there, it would have turned into a hate crime. So when we talk about hate speech leading to hate crimes, and then people say we should have free speech unless there's no violence, that argument is bogus. So obviously some accountability and action needs to be taken against these groups.
Well, there's, you mentioned, we talk about the kind of the impact of all of this, and I do wonder to what extent this very public display of hatred for people just because of their faith and because of Israel's existence has the effect of making people recoil and being like, oh my God, I didn't even know this existed in our country, that this was happening to this extent. I do see to some extent in kind of the elite media, there's a debate now about how much the left should grapple with its own anti-Semitism, and there appears to be some split in the party on their party on that question. Do you think that there is a sea change coming? Is it possible that all of this public insanity will lead to something better?
I really hope the world wakes up, and I think some people are. People who are morally sound and they haven't been entirely corrupted by misinformation and this radicalization of ideology, I think they will see the light. But unfortunately, amongst youth, I don't think that's going in the right direction, because there's a survey done, I think it's like a Harvard CAPS poll, and it said that 48% of young people, I think aged 18 to 24, would support Hamas over Israel in this situation.
Crazy.
So what will that look like 10 to 20 years from now if this ideology and these groups aren't stopped?
So I'm sorry, but what about on your campus after the events of October 7th, the terrorist attack on Israel, the beheading of children, the rape of women, the death of Israelis, the kidnapping of all these Israeli Jews, Americans? After all of that, and then, of course, you had the blow up on campus as the anti-Israel crowd, the pro-Hamas crowd, was trying to, I think, glorify our martyrs, glory to our martyrs. Were there any students on campus that you're aware of who said, well, wait a second, and they started to wake up from all of this and go, this is insane, I can't believe what I'm experiencing? Or are they just blind to what actually took place?
So actually, yes. So there were two instances. Just directly after October 7th, there was a pro-Israel Jewish students, a pro-Israel vigil. Students came together to mourn what happened on October 7th, and the following day, the anti-Israel student groups came out and had their own vigil that was basically pro-terrorist. And that was very clear. But what a few students and I did, actually, I think it was three of us, we stood on the opposite side, very far away from them. And we just stood there, like holding signs, holding an Israeli flag, didn't do anything. And there were some kids who came up to us and started asking questions. Some were very sympathetic and they said, I can't believe what they're doing. I saw what happened in Israel. I'm so sorry for your families and your friends. And I can't believe what your community is going through. And others they were like, I don't know much about this. I really want to learn from your perspective because I hear a lot from the other side.
Right.
And that's the approach that students need to take. And unfortunately, in universities and on social media, there's not really much room for that left. And that's the scary part.
So here's the question for you then. Is it your impression that the students who don't know what to think on this subject, and to the extent that they're sympathetic to the kind of pro-Hamas, anti-Israel side of the equation, are they in some way convinced that the events of October 7th didn't take place, or that it was like some sort of like a hoax or something? I mean, is that a view among some of these students?
I think there's certainly pieces of misinformation going around that would support that argument. And I don't know to what extent they believe that.
Okay.
But I know there are certainly people that do, and they're using the whole, Gaza, the operation now that Israel is doing in self-defense to say, yeah, Israel wanted this all along. Like October 7th was nothing compared to what we have now. So the narrative is, of course, changing. And some of them are convinced that October 7th was nothing, which is, totally absurd. And that's really the whole change in this story now is going to lend a lot of hostility to Israel, which goes in line with what I said previously about is the world going to wake up? And I think that this would also further the argument that it might actually get worse. But at the end of the day, there's a quote by Golda Meir. She was the late Israeli prime minister during the Yom Kippur War. She said, if I had to choose between being alive and having a bad image, or having a good image and being defenseless, I'd rather choose having a bad image and being alive. Something along that sort. And I think that that's what we're dealing with here, not only for Israel, but for Jews around the world.
It's a wild time to live through. Sabrina Soffer, Jewish undergrad student over at George Washington University. Thank you very much for your time and your insight today, Sabrina. Really nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. Now, can you imagine selling your house without having to list it? I'm serious, folks. My friends and realtors, Debbie and Sarah Reynolds with Reynolds Empower Home Team, have a new program you are going to love. It's called Sell with Certainty, and it is just what it states. Reynolds Empower Home Team will guarantee the sale of your house without having to list it. Don't leave money on the table through their Sell with Certainty program. Debbie and Sarah Reynolds will guarantee to sell your home at 100% of your asking price, or they will pay you the difference in cash. You heard that right. A promise that is guaranteed to get you the most money. Your home is your biggest asset, and you want to know you are with the most preeminent real estate team around. You want trust, confidence, and satisfaction. Debbie, Sarah, and Reynolds Empower Home Team are the team to trust. According to the Wall Street Journal, Debbie, Sarah, and Reynolds Empower Home Team are ranked the #1 real estate team serving the D.C., Maryland, and Virginia areas. If you are curious to know what you could get on the sale of your home in today's market, reach out to my friends and realtors, Debbie and Sarah at Reynolds Empower Home Team. Just call 844-344-SOLD, 844-344-SOLD, or go to DebbieHasTheBuyers.com. Now time for WMAL traffic and weather. Here's Ed Rodriguez in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center. My thanks again to GW University's Sabrina Soffer. What a fascinating conversation. She is sharp. And man, what must it be like for her on that campus right now amidst all this craziness? There is just so much nuttiness happening on college campuses across the country. I just hope Americans see this and wake up to it and help us right the ship. I'm always hoping that. Hey, coming up next, we're going to be talking to Congressman Andy Biggs about Congress's proclivity for spending all of your money on all sorts of issues at once. He'd like to slow that down. We'll discuss that, also the Biden crime family, and so much more ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Welcome back to the Vince Coglianese Show. Certainly a lot going on in the United States, and that means also a lot going on in Congress. Right now, lawmakers are trying to figure out which countries are going to receive more American taxpayer money and to what extent, and whether or not all of that should be lumped together. That's Joe Biden's preference. That's also Mitch McConnell's preference. But it's not the preference of House Republicans. For more on this, I want to bring in Congressman Andy Biggs. He is a congressman from Arizona. He's also a member of the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees. Congressman, great to have you back with us, sir.
Thank you, Vince. It's great to be with you, as always.
You know, thank you. And we saw Joe Biden give that big Oval Office address now, I think about 2 weeks ago. And when he did that, he said he was calling for another $100 billion in foreign aid. What I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but kind of shocked to see, is that he was exploiting Israel's suffering to give the lion's share of this money to Ukraine. And additionally, his plan was to spend some $14 billion bringing more illegal immigrants into our country. What do you think of this idea of lumping all this money together? And, you know, what should the path forward look like, if any?
It's an incredibly bad idea to lump it all together. In fact, I don't think we should have a foreign aid bill ever that is lumping every country together, because not all countries are on even footing. We probably should get rid of most foreign aid. But certainly, you cannot equate our relationship with Israel, which is extremely longstanding, many agreements in place economically, some joint security agreements, et cetera, with what's going on in Ukraine. You also can't, I mean, you've got two very different nations. Israel is proven to be quite reliable in its accounting of what we've done. Whereas Ukraine, as you know, they've got money going all over the place. We've got material that's ended up in rebellions in Central Africa, for instance. They were a kleptocracy before. They continue to be corrupt now, and so you've got very disparate countries, very disparate contexts, and Vince, the biggest context of all is when we're giving money to anybody, including our own citizens, we are borrowing that money. And so we're having to borrow the $14 billion that they want in Israel. You should definitely not couple it with $61 billion going to Ukraine when we're funding you. That would help fund their pension plan, their government system, plus their military, plus their farmers. And at the same time, you should not give Biden administration one more dime to facilitate the invasion on our southern border.
So on the Ukraine part for a moment, the average American has no idea how their money's being spent, this borrowed money that you pointed to. People who are in the media who look closely at this, myself included, have no idea how this money is being spent. And perhaps most troublingly, members of Congress, I keep seeing members of Congress say they have no idea how this money is being spent or accounted for or watched over. And so how is it that we could cut any more money to Ukraine until we get our arms around that, which is like, how has all the other stuff been spent?
That's exactly right. I mean, so the administration will come in and offer a briefing, and it's the same thing you can read. It's the same thing you read in publicly, where it's like, well, we got accountability, we've got people watching over it. It's all really great, and then you get a report like we saw over the weekend, where you actually have people stealing money because there's so much money coming in so quickly. They're just stealing it and going away.
That's the Time magazine report, so people know that a top aide to Vladimir Zelensky told Time magazine, quote, people are stealing like there's no tomorrow. That meaning they're just raiding all of this money and these resources that we are giving to Ukraine.
Yeah, and you know what, Vince, people like you and I have said that would happen as soon as we started giving money to Ukraine. Why? Because Ukraine was a kleptocracy before. I mean, they were considered one of the most corrupt nations in the world, money laundering hub. The hub of the in part to the Biden family, payola, if you will. But I mean, the point is, we're giving them money but we have no idea where it's going. We've given them material that has ended up all over the world. In some cases, my guess it's going to be used against us or our allies. So it becomes asinine to do that. But this administration wants to fully fund them. By the way, $61 billion ostensibly would fund them for the full year, supposedly. But my guess is Mr. Zelensky would be back here very quickly to ask for more.
Let's talk about Israel now. You've got House Republicans led by Speaker Mike Johnson have proposed this bill that would fund Israel to the tune of $14.3 billion in additional aid. That's above and beyond everything else we've given to Israel through the years to prepare it for exactly this moment when they're being assaulted and attacked by terrorists. $14.3 billion. It would be offset, Speaker Johnson says, by cuts to IRS funding that had been enacted under the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. In other words, they had hired tens of thousands of new IRS agents designed to go after middle-class Americans, despite the president's claim that it would only be rich people that were subjected to new audits. Do you like this plan, Congressman? And of course, we're looking at the White House saying that they reject it entirely.
Yeah, if you're going to give money to Israel, and by the way, I support Israel. It shouldn't be just about money either. I mean, we should have some pretty strong accountability measures in Israel too. I mean, because it's a lot of money.
Yes,
of course. But if you're going to do it, you should not just be throwing money to borrow it. I mean, even let's face it, even the money that was given to the IRS, which is $60 billion net last year, and they haven't spent it all. Thank goodness they haven't spent it all. Take that back. We were supposed to take that back. We actually passed legislation to do it. The Senate wouldn't take it up. This is actually an appropriate way to what we call offset. We're going to offset the spending for Israel by removing from IRS and its weaponized state. But Vince, I tell you, we should be doing some additional policies too. Why in the world are we going to give the Palestinians more money? Biden gave them $235 million 2 years ago. He wants to give them another $100 million. Believe me, it's fungible. That money gets in the hands of Hamas, and so you end up funding both sides of this, and that's another crazy thing.
Yeah.
You got us giving money to the Lebanese armed forces, which ends up in the hands of Hezbollah, and so you've got those things. What you really need to do is take the handcuffs off Israel, other than reporting the money. Let us know what's happening with it, and making sure that it's appropriately going. And by the way, most of that money will end up back in U.S. defense contractors' hands because they'll buy material and weaponry from us.
Yeah, that's the normal arrangement. We give so much money to Israel, but a lot of that money actually goes back to American defense contractors because they're required to buy American defense products.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the point is, you should never be funding both sides of a war. But we're kind of doing that with Ukraine and Russia. We're doing that. We're doing it here, and
we do it all the time. We did it in Afghanistan too. We were giving money to Pakistan, and that was flowing through their intelligence services into terrorism in Afghanistan that was killing our troops. We were funding both sides of all of these conflicts. I mean, at some point we got to grow sick of this, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're preparing. I've been told that they won't allow me to even offer my amendments, but I'm preparing amendments on all of these things that you and I are talking about to take the handcuffs off Israel and to stop funding both sides. And you know, there's other things there too. How about this? How about let's put aside the notion of a two-state solution. I mean, Israel basically gave Gaza over to Hamas, thinking that might resolve that issue in some ways, and they gave Hamas, they gave the Gaza quite a bit of self-autonomy. And the bottom line is, it didn't work. Every one of these people, every one of these nations, every one of these non-state actors as well, they want to wipe Israel off the planet. And so stop with the passe, quaint notion of a two-state solution. That ain't going to work. That's probably not going to work, and you got to admit it.
How often? And that's been offered like so many times. What is it, like half a dozen official times or something? It's like, and every single time, the Arab side of this equation says no. The Palestinians say absolutely not, never in a million years. And from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's about the eradication of Israel, and it always has been, and always will be, apparently.
Yeah, exactly right. Which gets back to double funding. Are some of our dollars going to fund the anti-Semitic faction of the Ukrainian army, what they call the Azov Brigade? And the answer is probably yes. I mean, it's not probably yes. Undoubtedly it's yes. So we end up funding bad actors all over the world, and I guess we have for decades and decades, and that's a problem because it actually increases our vulnerability. It doesn't help us become more safe and secure. I know that there will be foreign policy experts that can contest me on that, but I disagree with their position on that.
Congressman, let me shift gears with you now to some news today out of the House Oversight Committee. The chairman of your committee, James Comer, released bank records this morning at around 10 a.m. that showed that President Joe Biden previously took a $40,000 check from his family members right after they received money from Chinese business associates. In a video this morning that Comer posted on X, formerly Twitter, the bank records were outlined, which showed how various Biden family members would take the money from the Chinese business associates and wire it to Joe Biden shortly thereafter, quoting here from the Daily Caller. Interestingly, I'm looking at the numbers here, Congressman Biggs, and it looks like but Joe Biden receives $40,000. That is directly after the Biden family and Hunter Biden received $400,000 total. The math here seems pretty simple. $40,000 is 10% of $400,000. That flowed right to Joe Biden right after the Bidens got a big payday from China. What are we to make of this? And is this the the smoking gun that'll finally get everyone to admit that Joe Biden's been lying about this whole thing.
Well, the left is never going to admit that Joe Biden did anything wrong. But let's analyze that just for a second. So Owasco, which is one of dozens of shell corporations by Hunter Biden and a couple of his partners, they received in August the $400K you're talking about from another entity. So it got washed through. They got $400,000, but it started wandering through this from Hudson West 3 into Owasco, $400K, and then a few weeks later you get the $40K going to Joe Biden from Sarah Biden. And so, I mean, this is pretty consistent to everything we've seen. We've received an additional, I think it's 3,000 or 4,000 bank records that come through, and as we go through and we scrub this stuff, you find these amounts of money going to Joe Biden. And don't forget, the reason that that's so important is because we've had multiple witnesses testify that Biden was to receive 10% or 10% for the big guy. So as they're selling access or they're selling influence around the world, the Biden family, the corrupt Biden family, Joe Biden was getting a skim. He was getting 10%. And but the left always says, but these were loan repayments. Well, okay, so if they're loan repayments, the question would be, when was the principal lent by Joe Biden?
Yes.
There is no record whatsoever that he ever lent anybody any money because he didn't have money. Yeah.
Congressman, this word loan has appeared, I want to say, 1 million times now in the Biden family arrangements. For instance, an example that sticks out to me is right now, all of Hunter Biden's bills, including his tax bill, the overdue tax bills, have been paid by a Hollywood attorney by the name of Kevin Morris, and the money is being given to Hunter in the form of, quote, loans. It's being loaned to Hunter. And every time I see loan, I can't help but think this is all a way to evade taxation. They're trying to pass around money without paying taxes because they say, well, if it's a loan, then I didn't actually accrue any income. It's just a loan. It's just a loan. I don't have to pay income tax on that. And it strikes me that there's a massive tax scandal inside of all of this too.
Well, you're exactly right. So you got the actual substantive corruption going on over here, and then you've got to hide the money from the IRS. And so this is what the IRS whistleblowers were telling us was going on. They were not allowed to investigate this by IRS superiors that were preventing that from happening. So, yeah, I mean, why else do you? It's 150,000 here, it's 200,000 here, it's 40,000 there, all going to Joe Biden with. And by the way, there's no loan documentation. There's nothing that says there's a promissory note dated here. And there's no indicia that Joe Biden ever deposited or provided or wire transferred any money in from his own personal accounts to any of these individuals or corporations. So what are they doing? It is an IRS tax evasion scheme as much as a corruption scheme on the selling of access. So they should be coming and going, but we're fighting the weaponized now Biden administration, and we're fighting it because they're going to try to protect these guys. The media and the left-stream media is going to protect them. The corporate left media is going to protect them every chance they get, Vince.
Yep, no question. Well, let's see what they do today with this story. $40,000 identified going directly to Joe Biden after the Biden family made a whole bunch of money from China. Thank you, Congressman Andy Biggs, as always, for your time. Look forward to chatting with you again soon, sir. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Vince.
All right. Do you think you could imagine selling your house without having to list it? Seriously. My friends and realtors, Debbie and Sarah Reynolds with Reynolds Empower Home Team, have a brand new program that you're going to love. It's called Sell with Certainty, and it's exactly what it says it is. You know, Reynolds Empower Home Team will guarantee the sale of your house without having to list it. Don't leave money on the table. They have a Sell with Certainty program. Debbie and Sarah Reynolds will guarantee to sell your home at 100% of your asking price, or they will pay you the difference in cash. Yeah, a promise that is guaranteed to get you the most money. Your home is your biggest asset. You're going to want to know you are with the most preeminent real estate team around. You want trust, confidence, and satisfaction. Debbie, Sarah, and Reynolds Empower Home Team are the team to trust. According to the Wall Street Journal, Debbie, Sarah, and Reynolds Empower Home Team are ranked the #1 real estate team serving the D.C., Maryland, and Virginia areas. If you're curious at all to know what you could get on the sale of your home in today's market, reach out to my friends and realtors, Debbie and Sarah at Reynolds Empower Home Team. Call 844-344-SOLD. That's 844-344-SOLD. Or go to DebbieHasTheBuyers.com. Now time for WMAL traffic and weather. Here's Ed Rodriguez in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center. Well, this may be the funniest news event of the week. Did you know Vice President Kamala Harris was in London today talking about artificial intelligence? I can see why she'd be excited about artificial intelligence. Finally, here's the Vice President of the United States.
And when people around the world cannot discern fact from fiction because of a flood of AI-enabled mis- and disinformation, I ask, is that not existential for democracy?
Ooh, if she means this in earnest, she is so close to the truth here. She is so close. It's like she's kind of saying the quiet part out loud. Yeah, if AI is screwing up everyone's ability to understand the world, is that a threat to, quote, democracy, where the people have a say? Yeah, it is. Big time. And guess whose party it is? Kamala Harris, who is distorting artificial intelligence, real intelligence, literally everything, all of our understandings of the world. That would be the Democrats. She says AI is going to be great.
This is a moment of profound opportunity. The benefits of AI are immense. It could give us the power to fight the climate crisis.
And what she means by that is the ability to control people's minds, going right back to that first clip. It's crazy, and that's why it's Kamala Harris. The great one, Mark Levin, is up next here on WMAL.